Somewhere beneath the rocky hills of southern Lebanon, there is a world most people will never see. Not because it's secret in the way classified documents are secret, but because it was literally carved out of solid mountain bedrock, hundreds of feet underground, stretching across hundreds of kilometers. It has electricity. It has railways. It has ventilation systems and stairwells and weapons depots stocked with precision-guided missiles aimed squarely at northern Israel. And in March of 2026, the world got a brutal reminder that this underground empire isn't just some theoretical concern buried in intelligence briefings. It's operational, it's evolving, and it may have already changed the balance of power in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. To understand what we're really dealing with here, you have to let go of the mental image most people have when they hear the word tunnel. If your mind goes to Gaza, to those narrow, sandy passages dug with hand tools beneath the streets of dense urban neighborhoods, you're not even in the right category. What Hezbollah has built in Lebanon is something fundamentally different. Researchers who have studied it call it the land of tunnels. And that name isn't poetic exaggeration. It's a geographic reality. We're talking about an interconnected subterranean infrastructure that dwarfs anything Hamas ever constructed, both in scale and sophistication. And the reason it's so much harder to detect, so much harder to destroy, and so much more dangerous is rooted in geology itself. These tunnels aren't dug through soft sand or loose soil. They're bored directly into solid rock, the kind of dense, unyielding limestone and basalt that forms the mountainous terrain of southern Lebanon. That distinction matters enormously. A tunnel cut through rock doesn't collapse easily. It doesn't flood. It doesn't shift with the seasons. Once it's carved, it's essentially permanent infrastructure, as durable as a subway system. And Hezbollah didn't figure this out on their own. According to multiple assessments, the engineering know-how behind this network came, at least in part, from North Korea. That might sound surprising at first, but it makes perfect sense when you consider Pyongyang's history. North Korea has spent decades excavating massive underground military complexes through mountainous granite terrain on the Korean peninsula. They are arguably the world's foremost experts in subterranean military construction in hard rock environments. Reports indicate that North Korean advisors provided Hezbollah with critical technical guidance, the kind of expertise that turned what might have been a modest guerrilla project into something resembling an underground military city. So what does this network actually look like from the inside? The most detailed picture comes from what the Israeli military uncovered during Operation Northern Shield, a focused counter-tunnel campaign that ran from December 2018 into January 2019. During that operation, the IDF exposed and neutralized 6 cross-border attack tunnels, passages that had been dug from Lebanese territory and extended beneath the border into Israeli soil. The largest of those 6 was staggering in its ambition. It stretched 800 meters in length and sat at a depth of 55 meters. That's roughly 180 feet below the surface. Inside, Israeli forces found full electrical wiring and power systems, a functioning rail network designed to transport equipment and clear excavation debris, ventilation infrastructure to keep the air breathable deep underground, and constructed stairwells leading to exit points. This wasn't a hiding hole. This wasn't a smuggling route. This was a fully engineered offensive corridor, purpose-built to move large numbers of trained fighters rapidly and covertly from Lebanese staging areas into Israeli territory. And those 6 tunnels, they were just the ones that had crossed the border. The IDF acknowledged at the time that the vast majority of Hezbollah's underground network remained entirely within Lebanese territory, untouched and expanding. The cross-border tunnels were the tip of an iceberg that extends back dozens of kilometers into southern Lebanon, branching and interconnecting beneath towns, villages, and hillsides in ways that are extraordinarily difficult to map from the surface. To get a sense of just how vast this network really is, consider the research conducted by the Alma Research and Education Center, an Israeli think tank that has spent years analyzing open-source intelligence on Hezbollah's underground infrastructure. Their findings paint a picture that is, frankly, difficult to fully absorb. Alma researchers identified what they describe as a map of polygons, 36 distinct geographic zones encompassing towns, villages, and rural areas across southern Lebanon, each functioning as a local staging center with its own dedicated tunnel network. These local networks aren't isolated. They connect to one another through a broader regional grid, creating a system where fighters, weapons, and supplies can move laterally across a wide front without ever surfacing. One particularly striking assessment identified what appears to be a primary 45-kilometer attack tunnel route running through the heart of South Lebanon. And the infrastructure doesn't stop at the border region. Separate tunnel systems stretch beneath the southern suburbs of Beirut, where Hezbollah maintains its command and control apparatus, and along the Syrian border, where they serve as conduits for weapons smuggling from Iran's supply chain. When you step back and look at the full picture, you start to understand why analysts describe this as a paradigm shift. This is not a defensive network. It was built with a very specific offensive purpose in mind, a plan that Hezbollah has never really hidden. They call it Conquer the Galilee. The concept is chillingly straightforward. Using these subterranean routes, Hezbollah's elite Radwan Force, their most capable and battle-hardened fighters, would launch a massive surprise infiltration across the border into northern Israel. They would surface inside or near Israeli communities, overwhelm local defenses before a meaningful military response could be organized, and seize territory, take hostages, and create chaos on a scale that would paralyze the Israeli home front. If that scenario sounds familiar, it should. It echoes in many ways what Hamas attempted on October 7th, 2023, but with a force that is significantly better trained, better equipped, and operating from infrastructure that is orders of magnitude more advanced. But the tunnels serve another strategic purpose that might be even more consequential in a broader conflict. They function as hardened storage facilities for Hezbollah's most valuable military asset, its arsenal of precision-guided missiles. Israel has long maintained air superiority over Lebanon and has conducted hundreds of airstrikes over the years aimed at degrading Hezbollah's rocket and missile stockpiles. But air superiority means very little when the weapons you're trying to destroy are sitting inside chambers carved into solid rock 50 meters underground. The tunnels effectively neutralize one of Israel's greatest military advantages, creating a survivable second strike capability that can absorb a first wave of aerial bombardment and still deliver devastating firepower against Israeli cities. Now, Israel hasn't been sitting idle in the face of this threat. The counter-tunnel effort has been significant, and it's worth understanding both what's been accomplished and where the gaps remain. Operation Northern Shield, as mentioned, successfully identified and destroyed 6 cross-border tunnels in late 2018 and early 2019. The method was decisive: controlled explosions and concrete filling to ensure complete structural collapse. The operation also carried important diplomatic weight. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, confirmed that those tunnels constituted a clear and grave violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. That resolution, passed at the end of the 2006 Lebanon War, explicitly mandates the disarmament of all armed groups operating south of the Litani River and prohibits unauthorized military infrastructure in that zone. The discovery of offensive attack tunnels crossing an internationally recognized border was, by any legal standard, an unambiguous breach. In parallel with the tunnel-specific operations, Israel undertook a massive defensive construction project, a reinforced concrete barrier running approximately 130 kilometers along the Lebanese border. The wall includes both above-ground fortifications designed to prevent sniper attacks and ground infiltration, as well as below-ground sensors intended to detect tunneling activity. It's an impressive piece of engineering in its own right, and it almost certainly raised the difficulty and risk of any future cross-border tunnel construction. But walls, no matter how sophisticated, address only one dimension of the threat. They harden the border itself without doing anything about the vast network of staging areas, storage facilities, and movement corridors that sit kilometers back from the frontier on the Lebanese side. The most recent and intensive Israeli effort came during ground operations in southern Lebanon in October 2024. Troops pushing into Lebanese territory reported finding and destroying over 50 tunnel shafts. They described encountering hundreds and hundreds of underground positions, small fortified chambers, many stocked with food rations and supplies, each capable of sheltering roughly 10 fighters. The sheer density of what they found was striking. It suggested that virtually every village and ridgeline in the border zone had been honeycombed with underground positions, creating a defensive landscape where Hezbollah fighters could absorb an Israeli ground advance, disappear underground, and resurface behind advancing forces to strike from unexpected directions. And yet, despite the scale of those discoveries, military analysts were careful to note that what was destroyed likely represented only a fraction of the total network. The deeper infrastructure, the main arteries, the command nodes, the missile storage chambers, sits at depths and distances that a limited ground incursion simply cannot reach. Sealing 50 shafts is meaningful, but it's a bit like pruning the visible branches of a tree whose root system extends far beyond what you can see. If you're finding this breakdown useful, by the way, and you want to stay informed on how situations like this develop, because this story is very much still unfolding, consider subscribing to the channel. These are the kinds of topics that don't get enough detailed coverage, and having a community of people who actually want to understand the nuances makes it possible to keep producing this kind of content. The trajectory of events since those 2024 ground operations has only reinforced how persistent and adaptive this threat remains. By March of 2026, the situation along the northern border had deteriorated sharply. Hezbollah staged what was described as a relatively broad assault targeting the Galilee, Haifa, and the Krayot communities, the cluster of towns in the Haifa Bay area. It was the largest attack of its kind ever directed at that region. The details that emerged pointed to a combination of rocket and missile fire launched from positions that had survived previous Israeli strikes, almost certainly including weapons stored in hardened underground facilities. The attack underscored a deeply uncomfortable reality for Israeli defense planners. Despite years of counter-tunnel operations, despite the border wall, despite extensive aerial campaigns, Hezbollah retained the capability to deliver mass firepower against population centers well inside Israeli territory. There's a broader strategic lesson here that extends beyond the specifics of the Israel-Lebanon dynamic. What Hezbollah has built represents a new model of asymmetric warfare infrastructure, one where a non-state actor can effectively negate the conventional military superiority of a technologically advanced nation-state by going underground. The tunnels don't just provide physical protection, they provide strategic ambiguity. Israel's intelligence apparatus, among the most capable in the world, has struggled to build a complete picture of a network that is invisible from the air and largely immune to signals intelligence. You can't intercept a radio transmission. That never happens because orders are carried by hand through an underground corridor. You can't photograph a missile launcher that only surfaces for the minutes it takes to fire. The subterranean dimension introduces a fog of war that persists even in an era of satellite surveillance and cyber intelligence. The diplomatic dimension of this story is equally frustrating. Resolution 1701 was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario. It was negotiated in the aftermath of a devastating war with the explicit goal of creating a buffer zone in southern Lebanon free of unauthorized weapons and military infrastructure. UNIFIL was deployed to monitor compliance. And yet, over the course of nearly 2 decades, Hezbollah constructed an underground military complex of staggering proportions directly under the noses of an international peacekeeping force. UNIFIL has acknowledged the violations. The Security Council has been briefed. But meaningful enforcement has never materialized. The reasons are complex. They involve Lebanese domestic politics, Iranian strategic interests, Russian and Chinese diplomatic calculations at the Security Council level, and a fundamental tension in the peacekeeping model between observation and intervention. But the net result is that an international resolution designed to prevent the next war instead became a backdrop against which preparations for that war accelerated. Looking at what lies ahead, the challenge for Israeli defense planners and for anyone concerned with stability in the Eastern Mediterranean is that there are no easy solutions. Detection technology continues to improve. Seismic sensors, ground-penetrating radar, acoustic monitoring systems, and thermal imaging can all contribute to identifying excavation activity. But each of these technologies has limitations in hard rock terrain at significant depth. The physics of detection through dense geological formations are fundamentally more challenging than detection through the sandy soils of Gaza. Specialized military units trained in subterranean warfare are part of the answer, but sending soldiers into a defended tunnel network carved into rock is among the most dangerous operations any military can undertake. And diplomatic pressure, while necessary, has proven insufficient on its own to compel disarmament or even halt construction. What makes this situation so consequential is the combination of scale, durability, and strategic intent. This isn't a tunnel network built for defense alone, though it serves that purpose effectively. It was designed from the outset as an offensive weapon system, a way to project force across a border, to store and protect the means of striking deep into enemy territory, and to sustain prolonged military operations from positions that are extraordinarily difficult to neutralize. The engineering is advanced. The geographic coverage is vast. The strategic purpose is clear. And despite significant Israeli efforts to degrade it, the network remains a defining feature of the military landscape along the Lebanon-Israel border. The ground beneath southern Lebanon holds a military reality that most maps will never show. Hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, carved through unyielding rock, connecting dozens of staging areas, sheltering thousands of fighters, and an arsenal of guided missiles, all positioned within striking distance of millions of Israeli civilians. It is an invisible geography of war, built over years in silence, and it has already begun to reshape the strategic calculations of every actor in the region. Whether this subterranean empire ultimately becomes the launchpad for the conflict its builders envisioned, or whether detection and deterrence can evolve fast enough to contain it, may be one of the most consequential security questions of the coming decade. What's certain is that ignoring what lies beneath the surface is no longer an option anyone can afford.